Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your ninth online lecture on general surgery. Uh, Today, we'll be doing part one of two parts, and we'll be discussing surgical infections, surgical site infections, or surgical wound infection. So, what is a healthcare associated infection, or as you commonly call it, hospital acquired infection? HAI. This is an infection that follows either a surgical procedure or follows an admission to a hospital. That means that the patient, when he arrived at the hospital for his surgery or for any other procedure or investigations, was clear of any infection but acquired that infection during his hospital stay. So that is healthcare associated infection or hospital acquired infection. There are four main groups or four main types of HAIs: surgical site infection, operating site wound infection, respiratory tract infection, urinary tract infection, or bacteremia. This is usually due to indwelling urethral catheters or IV cannula, etc. So remember this: वुंड इन्फेक्शन, आरटीआई, यूटीआई एंड बैक्टीरियमिया, ये चार जो हैं इसकी आउटकम्स होते हैं. So what is wound infection? It is invasion by organisms through the host body tissues following a breakdown of local and systemic host defenses, leading to cellulitis, lymphangitis, abscess, and bacteremia. Here you have to remember these four outcomes. When any virulent organism, is able to cross the host body barriers and reach the tissues, it can then cause either a cellulitis or a lymphangitis or an abscess, or it can be blood-borne bacteremia. So, what is the epidemiologically, the surgical site or wound infections or the operation site is the third most common HAI and nosocomial infection or hospital acquired infection. So, wound infection is invasion by organisms through the host body tissues following a breakdown of local and systemic host defenses, leading to cellulitis, lymphangitis, abscess, and bacteremia. And this is the third most common hospital acquired infection. So, surgical wound infections are the third most common hospital acquired infection, and they range in 14 to 16% of hospital admissions. Or 14 to 16% of the HAIs are composed of surgical wound infections. And as we discussed, what is the importance of infections? That is, they increase the cost of the treatment and they increase the length of stay of the patient in the hospital. So, you've already studied Koch's postulates. For any organism to be declared as the causative infective organism, it has to fulfill these three criteria. That first, it must be found in considerable numbers in the septic focus. Second, you should be able to culture this bacterium in its pure form from that specimen from the septic focus. And then, if you inject this cultured infective organism into another host, it should be able to produce the similar disease as there was in the first one. So these are Koch's postulates, and I thought we should revise them. So what are the factors which prevent infection? These basically we are talking about host defenses now. Uh, Normal flora on the skin and the physical structure of the skin, they are the first barrier against any invading organism. Then similarly in the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, the GI tract, the respiratory tract, it is the intact epithelial surface of lining of those areas which also acts as the barrier against invading organisms on the inside, while on the outside the skin epithelial surface forms that physical barrier. Normal flora on the skin, the invading organisms have to compete with the normal flora on the skin, and they have to overwhelm them to form a nidus or focus of infection on the skin. Then low gastric pH, any ingested organisms are usually killed by the low gastric pH in the stomach. Then humoral antibodies, opsonins and complement form the next barrier against invading organisms or bacteremia. And cellular immunity in the form of phagocytes, macrophages, polymorphonuclear cells or killer T lymphocytes, etc. They form the cellular immunity against invading organisms. So these are host factors which fight the invading organism. So here we can see the risk of a surgical site infection is directly proportional to the bacterial load and its the virulence of the infective organism, and inversely proportional to the resistance of the host. The higher the resistance of the host, the greater the denominator, the lower the risk of surgical site infection. And the greater the bacterial or viral or fungal load and the greater the virulence of that organism, the greater the risk of surgical site infection. The greater the numerator, the greater the risk of surgical infection. So the risk factors can be divided into host factors, bacterial factors, surgery related factors. Resistance of the host is the host factor, bacterial load and virulence is the bacterial factor, and surgery related factors pertain to surgical technique, surgical skill, aseptic techniques that are used. So these are the risk factors which ultimately determine whether an infection will take place or not. So host factors, metabolic factors, comorbid conditions, as you know, diabetes, uremia, jaundice, all reduce body immunity. Malnourishment, either in the form of obesity or in the form of weight loss. Please remember, obese patients can be malnourished. They can be deficient in essential vitamins and certain essential minerals, which affects their body immunity. Then immunosuppressants, cancer and AIDS themselves can overcome the body defense mechanisms and suppress them. Otherwise, steroids, chemotherapy, radiotherapy being given to the patient and to the bone marrow can suppress the body immunity. Colonization of the GI tract by pathogenic organisms and becoming a carrier state is another risk factor, and whenever the gut is opened in these patients, and these pathogenic organisms can translocate and cause severe infection in the peritoneum. Or when the gut becomes ischemic or inflamed due to any reason, these colonizing pathogenic organisms which have become commensal for that patient can translocate into the peritoneum through the gut wall and cause peritonitis and infection. Then poor perfusion, any place where there is less circulation, of course, neither the humoral antibodies nor the cellular immunity, macrophages, etc., will be able to reach. So, in case of systemic shock or localized ischemia, uh, host factors, host immunity is reduced because the host cannot mount the adequate inflammatory response. Malnutrition causes weakened host response to bacterial colonization, even fungal growth, especially if enteral feeding is suspended in immediate post-operative period. Um, you will see that post-operative period, the patient's mouth, the tongue is coated, and bacteria can grow in the oral cavity, especially if the patient is put on total parenteral nutrition. Parenteral means other than the GI tract. So that would be IV nutrition depending on the nature of illness and surgery of the patient. If the patient is put on prolonged total parenteral nutrition, the oral flora will change and pathogenic organisms may get the opportunity to overwhelm the normal commensals of the oral cavity, and these would then uh, play a role in causing infection in the patient and sepsis. So, malnutrition plays a role in reducing host immunity. Similarly, comorbid like diabetes, poor glycemic control will increase the risk of infection and it delays healing and increases the mortality and morbidity of the patient. Why? Because it blunts the inflammatory response of the host towards any invading organism and reduces the immunity. So here in this chart we can see that when the blood glucose level in the patient is below 200, the risk factor increases by only 1. So this we can consider as the baseline, and immediately when the blood sugar level ranges between 200 to 250, the chances of wound infection increase by 2.5 times, and similarly here 3 times and 3.5 times. So essentially what we need to remember is that in the blood glucose level needs to be below 200 at the time of any surgery. In certain cases I preferred the blood glucose to be below 180. So the bacterial factors are, as we discussed earlier, virulence of the infective organism and the size of the inoculum. The instrument, the accident site, the environment, the stone, the clothes of the patient, whatever contaminants were in them, they get injected into the wound at the time of injury. So, if the size of the inoculum is more and the infective organism is also virulent, then you can expect the patient to develop a major wound infection. Then there are surgery related factors. These are the factors which are in our control. So, there's a lot of focus on how surgery related factors need to be handled. Um, uh, we have to work at avoiding the presence of dead tissue or foreign material. This is relating to the surgeon's technique. At the end of surgery, before you close the surgical site, we should ensure that no dead tissue or any foreign material which can cause a foreign body reaction and make the wound further prone to infection is left inside. This is the risk that occurs in case of dental implants. This is the risk that occurs in case of Prolene mesh in case of hernia, or even if you leave the chip of tooth enamel buried under the mucosa. Uh, Poor surgical technique also includes leaving dead space, potential dead space, because dead space does not have circulating blood in it. So that space, if bacteria get a chance to occupy that space, they will flourish and form pus before that pus reaches the walls of the dead space. So dead space has to be avoided in any surgical procedure. Similarly, if the surgeon has not ensured adequate hemostasis and there is bleeding inside this dead space, it will become a place where the blood acts as a culture medium. As you know, blood agar is used in the labs for growing cultures of the organisms, and cooked meat medium, uh, like the dead tissue, is also a culture medium. So these promote the formation of pus and infection in the. Then the longer the surgery, the more the wound lies open to the environment, and depending on the ventilation and the theater discipline in the OT, the wound can get infected. Again, the type of suture material that you are using, whether it causes a foreign body reaction or an inflammatory response, depends on the type of suture material. And then suturing technique. When you're the basic purpose of apposition of wound edges through suturing is to simply bring the two opposite edges together. The objective is not to forcefully tie them together. Once the edges are opposed, the healing by primary intention can take place, and healing across the gap takes place. But when you put too much tension on your sutures, the local capillaries in those areas on the wound edges, they get compressed, and macrophages and antibodies cannot reach the exact wound edges. As a result, the wound edges become prone to infection. So, operation technique also has a big role. So, what is decisive period? Decisive period is whenever the body comes across a new antigen, it instigates a cellular and humoral immune response, which is called acute inflammation. And but this cellular and humoral immune response takes at least 4 hours to mobilize. These 4 hours then are called the decisive period, whether the patient will become infected or his wound will become infected or not. Therefore, uh, it is this 4 hour period where the body is defenseless and needs antibiotic cover. So, in cases where you are expecting some sort of wound infection, or the commensals or the pathogenic organisms on the surface are there, like we discussed in a malnourished total parenteral nutrition patient, if you are going to do a dental procedure, this patient would need an antibiotic cover because you are expecting pathogenic organisms to be present in his oral cavity. Uh, and then you have to realize that the level blood concentration of the antibiotic must have reached the MIC 90, or the minimum inhibitory concentration of that antibiotic in the blood, before you actually start the surgical procedure. So, a wound infection can be a superficial wound infection or a deep wound infection, or it can be an organ space infection in the liver, in the peritoneum, or in the kidneys, etc. The sources of infection can be primary or secondary. Primary are considered endogenous. These are the infections that the patient brings to the hospital from his home, from his community, or from these arise from their patient's own body. For example, in case of a perforated gut, the feculent bacteria that escape into the peritoneum will cause peritonitis. Secondary or exogenous infections are the ones we are most concerned with, because these are hospital acquired and these are preventable. So, the patient can get infected from the operation theater, from the ward, from the instruments and hospital clothing, etc. These we will discuss further. So, primary sources we've already discussed, either from the ruptured internal viscera of the patient, from the home or from the community. And the secondary sources of infection. These encompass inappropriate theater design where the clean cases, the clean linen, the clean instruments are not isolated from dirty cases, dirty linen, dirty instruments. Inadequate theater sterilization where the theater cleanliness is not up to the mark, and then there is inadequate air filtration. This is a problem we are facing nowadays. Majority of the operation theaters and dental surgeries do not have laminar airflow, do not have HEPA filters on their intake, and do not have positive pressure ventilation from the theater to the outside of the OT complex. Um, and these we have to, because the corona infection is not going to go away quickly. Um, so this problem we are not nowadays trying to overcome in our operation theaters and dental surgeries. Then poor hand washing compliance, because hands touch the door handles, hands touch the patient, hands touch the doctor or the staff. If there is poor hand washing compliance, then cross contamination from ICU or hospital surfaces to the patient's wound can take place. Inadequate instrument sterilization, of course, because these instruments are going to go into the raw wound of the patient, and if they are already contaminated, they will contaminate the wound. So contamination generally takes place at the time of surgery or in the immediate post-operative period. Usually, primarily closed wounds are impervious to external contamination after 18 to 24 hours of surgery. So, however, if the wound has been left open, that wound can get infected through poor antiseptic dressing techniques in the ward or in the minor OT later on. So, how do we try and prevent wound infection, prophylaxis of wound? First is the pre-operative preparation. This is your pre-operative surgical techniques, prophylactic antibiotics. Intraoperative measures means the surgeon's technique of not leaving a dead space, not leaving dead tissue behind, controlling the bleeding, adequate hemostasis, no hematoma formation, no over-tight suturing of the subcutaneous or the skin or mucosal surfaces to prevent ischemia. Then theater technique, the sterilization of instruments, the sterilization of the operation theater, aseptic techniques, use of antiseptics on the skin or the mucosa, the design of the operation theater to have laminar flow in the theater, and then theater discipline to avoid unnecessary movement in the OT and unnecessary people in the OT. Then post-operative wound care and antibiotics play a role in prevention of wound infection. However, I would like to emphasize that prevention is better than cure. These steps are more important. If they have been done adequately, only then wound care and antibiotics really work. Short hospital stay is advocated, otherwise patients is likely to pick up resistant organisms, respiratory tract infections or urinary tract infection or cannula site infection. So short hospital stay is also one of the prophylaxis. So wherever the patient does not need imperative admission, prolongation of the admission, they must be discharged and go back to the clean environment of their home. That also prevents wound infection. Then avoidance of pre-operative shaving. Shaving with the razor blade causes microabrasions, and these microabrasions can be the route through which organisms on the skin surface can breach the skin and go into the tissues and cause wound infection. So nowadays, um, immediate before surgery, Shaving is not done, rather a zero size hair trimmer is used to trim the hair in the operating site. Antiseptic skin preparation, like we use Biodine, or you may use oral mouthwash um, for antiseptic preparation, uh, and reduce the number of bacteria on the skin surface. And then, as we discussed earlier, the decisive period, the role of prophylactic antibiotics. Prophylactic antibiotics need to be used in decisive period given intravenously. 20 to 60 minutes is the ideal time before the incision. At the time of induction of anesthesia, usually by this, once after the anesthesia is given and then the patient is washed and draped and the surgeon's equipment is all set up, it is usually 20 minutes to the skin incision. Usually in clean cases, single shot is given, but in admitted patients, it would be advisable to repeat this shot, give a second shot at 4 hours after the first IV antibiotic. That should be adequate coverage, and sometimes that is all the antibiotic cover in clean surgeries that you give. However, depending on whether the wound is itself infected or endogenous causes of infection exist, then you can continue at second dose at 4 hours after the first dose, and then you can repeat 8 hourly or 12 hourly depending on the antibiotic you're using. Choice of antibiotic or the combination of antibiotics used depends on the expected spectrum of the organisms in that condition. Wound infections can be major wound infections or minor wound infections. Major wound infection where there is significant quantity of pus either drains spontaneously from the wound or needs a secondary procedure, either incision drainage or opening of the stitches to allow the wound to gape and the pus to drain. So, major wound infections with significant pus formation inside the wound planes is associated with systemic signs like tachycardia, fever, leukocytosis, and this spectrum, these systemic signs come under the heading of systemic inflammatory response syndrome, SIRS. And these are not specific to any organism. This is the general systemic inflammatory response to any invading organism. And major wound infections definitely delay discharge from the hospital. Minor wound infections may show redness or pain or may discharge minimal quantity of pus or infected serous fluid. However, these are usually not associated with systemic signs like excessive discomfort or fever or tachycardia or pain, and they usually do not delay returning of the patient to home. So, if we look back at what we have studied so far, the risk of surgical wound infection depends on host factors and environmental factors. Then, comorbid conditions like malnutrition and metabolic diseases are important host factors regarding body immunity. And then, the technique of surgery and the type of surgery also influences the risk of infection. As we discussed earlier, whenever an infective organism gains entrance into the body, the outcome can be either an abscess formation or cellulitis, lymphangitis, and the fourth one was bacteremia. So, these three are localized wound infections or surgical site infections. Bacteremia causes generalized SIRS, and the bacteria can then lodge in distant places wherever there's a metal implant or a foreign body or any other tissue trauma or injury. These circulating bacteria can launch there, so that would not come under surgical site infection. Abscesses usually take 7 to 10 days to form. Abscess is a pocket of pus. So this pocket of pus, the bacteria need to multiply enough to destroy enough tissue, cause enough tissue necrosis and suppuration to form a pocket of pus. This usually takes 7 to 10 days, and Staph aureus usually is the organism. Although many other pathogens and extremely virulent other pathogens also exist. So, Staph aureus causes tissue necrosis and suppuration, and the pus is composed of dead and dying white blood cells which release cytokines and oxygen free radicals and others, interleukin 6 and cytokines, etc. They cause tissue damage, tissue necrosis, and this pus is then surrounded by an acute inflammatory response in the walls of the abscess, and the surface of the abscess is covered with a pyogenic membrane composed of fibrinous exudate and edema. So this here you must remember that there is no blood circulating within the pus or this pyogenic membrane. However, there is circulating blood in the surrounding tissue with an acute inflammatory response. And understanding this concept decides how we treat abscesses. Heavy antibiotics, low virulence of an organism can cause the pus to remain within the body and dry up. This is then called an antibioма. It is an organized abscess which is partly sterilized by the antibiotics that you have given. However, the usual outcome is that the pus may tract along the path of least resistance and discharge on the skin, and then this may result in a sinus formation or a fistula formation if it is extending from the gut or internal hollow viscus to the skin surface. It would be a fistula, or an abscess can ultimately, once the it has organized, it can get calcified, and that abscess wall would then be visible as a egg-shaped or spherical uh, calcified structure on X-rays. Any pus or collection of a liquid inside the body can be diagnosed with the use of ultrasound, CT scan, MRI scan, or in case of bone with the radioisotope bone scan. So, the treatment of choice for an abscess once a pocket of pus has formed is incision and drainage. Why? Because your macrophages and antibodies, the body's host immune response cannot reach the liquid pocket of pus. The circulation is limited to the walls of the abscess. So, once you drain the abscess, incise and drain the abscess pocket collapses, and once you wiped off the pyogenic membrane on the walls of the abscess, the inflammatory cells on the walls can reach the opposite side, and healing from secondary intention can take place. So, cleaning would be a more appropriate method in my experience. Rarely, curettage of the abscess cavity is required. Once the idea is to drain the liquid pus and to wipe off the walls of the abscess cavity with um, a gauze piece. However, this is relevant in acute abscesses. In chronic abscesses or chronic osteomyelitis where granulation tissue has formed, these granulations hold bacteria in them. These granulations then need to be thoroughly curated before healing in the abscess cavity can take place. So incision and drainage, cleaning and curettage, and then antibiotics need to be given, and long term, sometimes daily, sometimes twice daily. Antiseptic dressings have to be done until the abscess cavity heals fully and is again epithelialized. The second option that can occur on entry of an invading organism into the uh, body is cellulitis. Cellulitis is non-suppurative infection of the tissues. There's poor localization with generalized redness of a large area, pain and swelling, all the inflammation signs, all the four signs of inflammation, calor, rubor, tumor, dolor are there. Pain, swelling, redness, and increased local temperature. Usually, cellulitis is caused by staphylococci or beta hemolytic streptococci or Clostridium perfringens. Systemic signs are usually there. Fever, rigors, and chills may be present, and all the signs of SIRS are there. The cellulitis may ultimately lead to ulceration of the overlying skin or gangrene of the overlying skin or surrounding tissues and severe tissue destruction depending on the virulent organism, virulence of the organism involved. Then the third option would be lymphangitis. This is inflammation of the lymphatic channels. Once a microorganism, pathogenic microorganism enters the skin or local tissues, this may present as painful red streaks emanating from the site of injection or entry into the skin. And these are often accompanied by painful lymph node groups, lymphadenitis. For example, lymphangitis in the thigh or leg may end up with painful enlarged lymph nodes in the groin and inguinal region. So, the four outcomes you must remember whenever an infective organism gets into the body, it can either cause an abscess formation or cellulitis or lymphangitis, or it can cause generalized bacteremia with bacteria circulating in the circulation. So with that, we come to the end of part one of your general surgery lecture on surgical infections, and we will continue this on the 10th lecture, which will be part two of this same lecture.